Hello, this is the history of early Jacksonville, Florida. In 1562, John Ribault and French Huguenot colonists arrived at the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, naming the River May before leaving. Randy Laudonnière returned 2 years later to settle and build Fort Caroline. And then in 1566, the Spanish arrived and massacred the settlers before taking over Fort Caroline, extending the territory to Fort St. Nicholas. Spain then ceded to Great Britain in 1763, prompting 20,000 acres of land to be granted to two marquises. These marquises were of Hastings and Waterford. Spain then received the land back in 1783. And then over the years, the St. Johns River had been called Ilaka or Wileka by the English speakers, the River May, or the San Mateo River. Jacksonville had also been called Wakapalaka, Fort Caroline, and Cowford. Land was quickly given away after Spain regained control of the area. Maria Taylor received 200 acres of land after her husband, Pernell Taylor, died. Louis Zachariah Hoggins married Maria 2 years after this, and they built their homes at where Forest and Hogan Street now is. And then E.M. Chaney bought John M. Forbes land in 1861, which would now be modern-day Riverside. Then John Middleton bought his daughter land in 1870, which would be Springfield today, but was specifically originating from Old Springfield. As more settlers bought land, it expanded the traffic of travelers who came through. This prompted the development of more and more buildings. The first hotel was opened by John Brady, who hosted travelers who came through Cowford. Hogan's home was also an open house to people who came and went as they pleased. Then William G. Dawson and Stephen E. Bucks opened the first store in Cowford, which became a trading hub. And then Isaiah D. Hart created a town site, which he had asked Hogan and Brady to donate land to the streets. Market Street was the first street, followed by Bay Street. Then Liberty Street, also called Ferry Street at the time, was developed. Then Julia, Laura, and Ocean, once named Ocean, were named after Hart's children. Many of the early streets also had patriotic names to show the patriotism that the residents had. John Warren suggested that the town was to be named Jacksonville after General Andrew Jackson once the town was starting to fully develop. Hart was then deemed the founder of Jacksonville, as he had seen the development of Jacksonville throughout his whole life, and he had owned all the land that makes up Old Jacksonville at one point. He bought and sold most of it over the years. In 1821, the United States bought Florida, and then 1 year later, Duval County was created. Once Duval County was created, James Dale was elected as the first sheriff, and then he served for 2 years before Daniel C. Hart replaced him. The first courthouse was built during this time in 1825, but it would be burnt down in 1863. And then later, Jacksonville was recognized legally as a town in 1832. Education was reestablished in 1845, and the Old Fellows School at Adams and Market Street, and then the Presbyterian Chapel near Monroe and Ocean Street were the first two schools to develop. And then the first graduating class was in 1878 from the Duval High School. Quickly, railroads were developed within Jacksonville. The Florida Atlantic and Gulf Railroad was built near Adams and Clay Street, then extended out to Julia Street, and then Henry Flagler, who had many plans for Jacksonville, built the Florida East Coast Railway in 1890, which expanded down into South Florida. It ran for 25 years for the public within Jacksonville. Then came the fire of 1901. It was started in the Cleveland Fiber Factory at Beaver and Davis Street, where a spark had hit a cluster of fabric that was drying out. And the fire was spread by winds that day, burning for 8 hours across 5/8 of a mile north and south, and then 1/2 of a mile east and west. This covered over 466 acres of land, which is where modern-day Springfield is. It destroyed almost every single building in its wake, and notable buildings destroyed included the Windsor Hotel, the Armory, churches, and an orphanage. In 1940, NAS Jax opened, and it trained over 20,000 aircrew and pilots during World War II, and still does so today. And then in 1968, the Jacksonville International Airport was opened, and then in 1999, NAS Cecil was opened. Jacksonville has developed to a large city today with over 900,000 residents, and it holds many culturally diverse neighborhoods and communities that thrive with great history.